Welcome, 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 everybody, to Live with Christopher Hopper and Mr. Dan Wong in the house. It's great to have you all tuning in here this evening, 8 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, November 15th, release day for Imperium Descent Volume 1. I am so happy to have you in the house. And Dan, so great to have you here. This is huge. Thank you.
Hey, Christopher, good evening, and thanks everyone for joining. I see a few people in the comments section already. If you're here and you want to just drop your name in or just say hi, love to recognize you and see who's here. I see Yard, Gary, good to see you, and Gerard. We've got also someone who likes to call themselves Facebook user, whoever that is. Feel free to introduce yourself as well.
And Fred Courier says, huge. Fred, this is so great to have you here. Thank you for for being on. Yes, this is a huge evening, big night for us. Really, really special. OTF, guys. Yes, own the field. Dan, thank you for saying yes to this. Mauricio. Sorry, I gotta say Mauricio here in Brazil. Wow,
Well,
super cool.
It's now an international affair today, Christopher.
It is, and in light of Mercedes-Benz win yesterday, their 1-2 in Brazil. I feel like that's a big deal. So go Brazil. That's all I can say.
Well, and I think you know this. My wife's company sponsors Mercedes-Benz, so I'm pretty sure there's a bit of happiness going on at her company right now. So
you did not tell me that, Dan. I did not know that. One more reason for me to love your wife. Well, cool. Well, Dan has graciously agreed to interview me, and I am really honored for the for the connection. Dan, you've been a dear friend and have edited some of my work, proofed some of my work. So this is really a special event to have you with me tonight. So thank you for saying yes.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and I'm delighted to have this opportunity and to interact with a bunch of people. I see Wrangler, Helen, you're here. Great to see you. This is fun. This is what makes really the audiobook and the reading hobby for me so enjoyable. The opportunity to interact with authors and fellow readers and listeners. So this is icing on the cake. So I know the competition for this job was intense. I think second only to America's Got Talent. So thankfully the applicant pool was only me. So that was a
you never know. I never told you who else I asked. You don't know.
Oh.
You know, I could have had people write in and be like, Christopher, can we interview you? And I was like, Katy Perry, I'm sorry. I love you, but you don't know sci-fi. And if you don't know sci-fi, you're not on the main list. Sorry.
Well, we have a comment here. Let the Hopper roast commence. So absolutely, feel free, everyone, to put the comments in, and we'll get to them. Questions, comments, roasts. I don't see Robert on yet, but if he's here, I know that he wanted me to remind you to put the shirt back with the logo.
Very cool. Look at that. That is I haven't even seen that in person.
So there we go. There we go.
That's fantastic. Did you sleep on the couch? That's what I want to know.
I had to beg for lots of forgiveness and remind my wife of the vows. So I did not have to spend the night on the couch after posting that photo, Christopher. So
that's so fantastic. Well, for what it's worth, I was asked a couple times, and we actually put the shirt back on the website with the back print available now for people. We had to increase the price like $2 to accommodate that. They're just so stinking expensive to print right now, and inflation and yada yada. We all know the drill, but we tried to keep it as low as possible. I think they're like $32.95 is what we've tried to negotiate. So
worth every dollar, Christopher. Very comfortable, good fitting, and I look forward. I haven't worn this outside yet. I wanted to. This is the first regular wear of this one, so I look forward to being the sandwich board for you out in Toronto, Canada. So
you're amazing. Thanks, Dan. Thank you.
Well, why don't we get cheers? Why don't we get right into it? I know that people are dying to hear about the book, hear about you. I've got a few questions here. You've already said that nothing is off limits. So the gerbil, the jello, and the Vaseline, we might jump into that. We'll see. We'll see.
I mean, listen, what we did in Colombia needs to stay in Colombia. But if you want to bring it up, Dan, I'm okay with that.
Touche, sir. Why don't we do? We'll just start off we'll call it rapid fire Q&A, just to. I know you're very accessible and very open, but I think why don't we, let's provide an opportunity for those who have joined us to get to know you a little bit better. So I'll shoot a couple questions off you
Cool.
to you and get you to answer them kind of rapid fire style. So
Okay.
When did you first start writing?
I started writing seriously writing in 2003, the year we got married, and into 2004. That was like, I'm going to publish a book kind of writing. I could say 8th grade English with my teacher, Mrs. Sanquist, and always enjoyed creative writing. But in terms of what people would know me for, 2003, I'd say.
Okay, and what was your first book that you cared to talk about?
Well, the first book is the first book, Rise of the Dybor. It was in a trilogy called The White Lion Chronicles. And I still have readers with me from that day, believe it or not, people who read that advanced copy, made some really cool friends. Douglas Gresham probably being the most famous one. For those who might not know his name, his stepfather is C.S. Lewis. And so Doug, I reached out to Doug because he was the inheritor of the C.S. Lewis estate. And I wanted all the heroes in my life who'd inspired me to get a copy of the book. And he actually got a copy and ended up writing an endorsement for it that's still on that draft, on the published edition. So, and we stay in touch, and we've been to his homes in Ireland and Malta. So yeah, it was a fun connection.
Oh man, see, clearly writing takes you places.
It does, for sure.
So speaking of writing, so how many published books have you written or co-written so far?
Oh, that's a good question. I think we're up at 29 or 30, and then there are probably another 3 or 4 that no one will ever know were me because of NDAs. But we're well over 30, but I think 29 or 30 with my name on them.
Wow. So complete the sentence. If I wasn't writing, I'd be
a surf bum in SoCal.
That's a good plan B.
With a long beard and really weathery skin. Yeah.
And so boxers or briefs?
Boxer briefs and boxers.
Oh.
I turned in my tighty whities on a tour. We were on a U.S. tour in 2002, and my band made fun of me for still wearing tighty whities, and that was it. I never went back.
So I'm going to take you back to you talked about you first started writing in 2013. So how different was it?
Or 2003.
Sorry, 2003. Sorry, thank you. So 19 years ago, how different was it in terms of interacting with readers or listeners back then as it is compared to nowadays?
I feel like there's almost no comparison. It almost feels like, the analog days of interaction and community building. You could have a website. Commando. Thanks, Gerard. I had a website for sure, but it was more geared toward my music career at the time. And so if you had fandom at all, it was around email and some of the old, like GeoCities and the what was the BB8? No, not BB8. The forums that you could create.
The bulletin boards.
Yeah. There were the bulletin board. That was the style of community you had. So it's nothing like this. I mean, being able to obviously live stream an interview together for fans wasn't going to happen. So in terms of the community, it just wasn't there. In terms of the writing, I was writing on an iMac and printing out things on my little printer on the office floor and trying to get a publishing deal. So yeah, I much prefer 2022. It's way more fun because of this.
Indeed. So we're here to celebrate and promote the launch of Imperium Descent. So for the benefit of those who have only recently either discovered your work or heard about this only name, why don't you tell us about this series and the first book? What do you want? What do you want us to know about this book?
Cool. Okay. Well, I would say that this series is really getting back to probably my purest love of science fiction. It's going to be closer to Ruins of the Galaxy for people that have read my previous work, and therefore, when I say that, I mean it's really the space opera adventure. A little bit of a slower burn than military science fiction has a particular clip to it, and which is a lot of fun to write. And it moves quickly as a writer. You can knock out a lot of words, but this is much more like I'm going to take my time and describe, what the alien is wearing in the second paragraph of the opening chapter. Normally, don't do that, in a quick paced book. And so I really wanted to have this sense of immersion. One of the reviews already came in today, and they noted that, like, I think I can smell the world I'm in. And when they said that, I was like, yes, that's exactly what I was hoping for. So more traditional space opera, a lot of character development, really setting up the politics and the unseen pressures of a system that is suppressive, and how these characters live and operate, no matter if they're in the upper echelon or lower echelons of this society. And so getting those different perspectives, I think, is a lot of fun. And is he describing it in hopes of Sherry making costumes? I mean, Sherry Moore is pretty fantastic at making costumes.
So I see an opportunity to partner with her, Christopher, in actually making cosplay items for your Imperium Descent character. So just keep that in mind. Another idea for you right there.
I like it. If we do a get together, maybe that's a requirement for one of the evening events.
Oh, let's put that on the agenda. So
Okay.
what themes would you say did you have you explored so far in your first book?
Man, that's a great question too. The themes, there's certainly some of the ones that I think most of us would think of. Themes of friendship, themes of loyalty, and loyalty's tested. There are other themes though that are more dramatic and have some nuance and subtext to them, and that are more intense. Like, maybe some people don't want to escape to them, but they're intrigued by them. For instance, this book has already gotten huge traction on the disability community on TikTok today, which is, it's blown up actually in a huge way, and that really touches me. I had a friend just post a video a couple hours ago. It has like 10 or 15,000 views already, and because we're talking about things like a society that is oppressive toward those who have disabilities. And that's a heavy theme, like not something you're like, "Ooh, I can't wait to go mow the lawn and listen to this really heavy book." And so I think to counter that, there's a lot of humor involved, and there's a lot of whimsical characters who help lighten some of the load, if you will. But yeah, certainly, how does systematic oppression affect people, and what kind of fortitude does it take to rise above those things, or even just go toe to toe with them? It's not even rise above it. It's just meeting it where it's at. That could be really intense. So
I know the theme that you just touched on definitely came through when I listened to it, but I will say it didn't come across preachy or in any type of soapbox way. So I think
cool.
you did a really good job in terms of addressing it, introducing it, and making it part of the fabric without in the right way. So
wow.
We've actually got a good question here that actually is marries something I wanted to ask you as well. So, take us through a bit of the writing process behind the scenes now. So we've got an exclusive opportunity with Christopher Hopper behind the scenes. Help us, what can you share about the writing process for Imperium Descent? So we have a question here in terms of the world building. So why don't can you share how long that process took for you?
Yeah. I started pretty heavy daydreaming, I would say, and that's where most of my books start, as daydreams. laying down, go to bed, and your brain starts to kind of go off on a rabbit trail and taking long walks. So all that process started in January of this year. I could say earlier, because really I think all books in serial authors, they live inside of us for a while, and we're drawing from previous books and thinking, I wish I would have done this instead with that character, or just what if that character was more like this kind of person and this trope. So Ruins of the Galaxy certainly informed this. Ruins of the Earth informed this. Infinita informed this. But by the time January came around, I'm like, I'm gonna bring Infinita to a close, and I'm gonna start daydreaming about a new series that's more in my love for space opera. And so that always begins in Evernote for me after the daydreaming phase. I'm taking lots of notes in Evernote. I have hundreds of files. Excuse me. And I mean hundreds, like hundreds of research files. I'm collecting everything from articles I read in real life, IRL, to sketches I'm making in my notepads, my physical notepads on my iPad. And actually, I might show you something in a second. I have a cool little sketch of a character who is in book 2 of volume 2, I should say, of Imperium Descent. But yeah, collecting all those ideas and starting to flesh out those characters, and where do they fall in their morality? Where do they fall in their demeanor? And are they demonstrative? Are they more reserved? And starting to write backstories for them, and all that stuff. It can feel overwhelming, I think, especially to new authors. But the point isn't that you keep it on Post-it notes right in front of you as you're writing. You really have to internalize it, so that the character, the more you internalize it, the more natural the character feels once you're writing them on paper or on page. And I think that is the mark of when you really start to arrive, maybe as a writer, is that stuff is internalized. You feel what the characters are feeling. You already know their backstory as if it were your own backstory, and then you write from that rich place.
And so unlike Infinita, which is you've described as kind of hard sci-fi, Imperium Descent is less hard. I'm curious, did you spend much time doing research beyond kind of the daydreaming and the world building for this book, or for the series that we'll see in the volumes that will to come?
Research was much more for Infinita from a technical standpoint, because all the science had to be right. And there isn't a single invention in Infinita. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. There isn't a single technology that I've talked about in Infinita that does not have some root in our modern day civilization. That was a lot of work. The research that I did for Imperium Descent had much more to do with a cultural analysis, believe it or not. So I'm collecting articles about what's happening with Russia and the Ukraine right now. What does an autocracy look like? What does an oligarchy look like? How does a civilization, how do a people group respond when threatened? Strategically, what are they doing when they're faced with a superior foe? So a lot of the research happened there, but most of my time, honestly, was spent in world development. And so thinking about, okay, I have 16 planets in the Imperium sector of space. Galaxies are really big, right? They're really, really, really big. So 16 planets means nothing. I mean, it's a fraction of how many solar systems could be in a galaxy. So what's around those 16 planets? Well, you have the chaosic regions, and that's what all those in the Imperium sector of space call anything that's not their section of space. That's just the chaosic regions. And they're unexplored in book 1, but we start to dabble with it in book 2. And so thinking through, okay, you have this planet. What are they known for? Do they mine something that helps the system? Do they have a particular cultural attribute? And again, you're talking whole planets. Really, we're talking about more like city-states and regions of a country. But you have to generalize for planets, or else people will get lost, because we can barely handle all the cultures on our planet Earth, So there is a little bit of cutting corners there, but it's still, I'm trying to give the impression of, oh yeah, Racinia, that's an interesting planet. They make really great swords, don't they? And I like that kind of those connections and touchstones. So
cool. Okay. And without giving too much of the story away, was there a character or a scene in the book that you really enjoyed writing or acting? Because for those who don't know, Christopher also not only wrote the story, but also acted the voices of all the characters for the audiobook as well. So what can you share without spoiling it for those who haven't enjoyed it yet?
Man, that's a great question. I loved reading this book. Like, having the end audience member in mind, the listener in mind. I was like, I want to paint the picture for those people so that they feel enthralled and enraptured with the performance to the best of my ability as an actor, which is limited, but hopefully not. I don't want to jerk people out of the story just because, wow, it's some crazy author you wanted to do his best to try, and boy, does he suck. I wanted them to feel the best compliment I got actually were a couple of listeners already who have said, I forgot it was you halfway through the story. That's a win. Like, that meant so much to me. So, but a scene that I really enjoyed, there is a conflict between Aurelia, who is one of the main protagonists. She's a princess, and her mother, who is a queen. And they are arguing through two different lenses, two different worldviews, which I think is very endemic of, she's a 20-something daughter of a very powerful woman, and they see the world very differently, and it gets heated, like really heated, because the issue they're talking about isn't like, I don't like your purse. Well, I don't care if you like my purse. I'm going to, they're talking about lives. And there was somebody actually just said today earlier, like, that was the most powerful scene for me. And the listener said I was crying. And I said, well, that's interesting, because I was crying reading it. Like, I was embodying that character so much and trying to feel what they were saying, that I was crying. I had to hit stop and like wipe my eyes because I needed a minute. And that for me that's when I know there's a win. That's when I know, okay, we have something here. And hopefully this resonates and people don't go, wow, that guy's nuts. Hopefully they're thinking, wow, that character is really going through something and I can relate.
Wow, that's powerful to know you're putting that much into the voice performance. I think is incredible. So,
thanks.
Have you decided how many books you plan to write in the Imperium series?
That's probably my favorite question so far, because I don't have an end goal for this series. And what I mean by that is a lot. Like, I could write 20 or 30 books in this series. It's just dependent upon whether fans like it, readers and listeners. If they think, wow, this is really cool. This is a world I could get lost in. If I hear that enough, then I will be going for it for a while. Not just that, but there are side stories as well. I mean, lots of these characters have tales to tell. We started the Rogues and Rebels short story for the VIP club, which is anybody who joins the VIP club gets to get that story for free. Current members of the VIP club have already gotten Rogues and Rebels. But if you'll notice, it's Rogues and Rebels Encounter on Rock. And so the story is really called Encounter on Rock, but that brand of Rogues and Rebels, in my mind, could be a whole series, maybe even a weekly episodic series that tells stories around the main series of novels. So I'm in, man. I hope everybody likes it as much as I've enjoyed creating it for them, because then that means I get to do this a lot more and they get a lot more to read and listen to. So let's go.
Call that a win-win. So, so notwithstanding what you said, am I correct then in assuming you haven't actually figured out the ending for this series because you want to see where it goes? Because I know people like Craig Allenson has made it clear that with his Expeditionary Force series, when he started the series back in, I think it was 2016, he had actually already written the final chapter. He knew how that series would end. Is that completely not in the cards, or you have an idea, but you're flexible depending on how the world unfolds?
So I'm doing something very different with this series. I can tell you for Ruins of the Galaxy, I knew exactly where I wanted it to wrap up, and that was 9 books. For Ruins of the Earth, I knew exactly where it needed to wrap up. For this series, I have no clue. And I am like, see, we call it pantsing it. You have outliners and you have pantsers. I'm a heavy outliner of the stories, and usually know one book to the next, or the whole arc. I know the end of the arc of the story. In Imperium Descent, I do not know the end. It's terrifying and wonderful, and that's, I think, some of the excitement. Like, this is important to me as a writer, which is, if I know how everything's going to wrap up, there's no more mystery for me. It kind of takes the charm and the intrigue away from me, and I need that to keep going. And so this one, it's almost like I don't want to know, because if I do, I might get sad, and I might just it's lost its spark. But right now, like, I am discovering what happens to these characters almost as soon as the reader and listener is. I have the advantage of being, okay, I'm a book ahead of you, but that's it. And so we're going to see where this goes together and how long it goes.
Well, I think the word together, I think, is key. I think one thing that sets you apart, in my experience, Christopher, is the togetherness, the level of interaction, accessibility that you provide to not only your VIP members. So just as a quick plug for those who are participating now but aren't part of Christopher's VIP club, go check out his website and sign up. You get there's the link right there. You get a lot of free swag. You get a lot of time with Christopher. There's coffee with Christopher almost every Friday. We have second season for Coffee with Christopher. As a listener, it makes the experience that much more enjoyable to be able to interact with the author, get behind the scenes, or just almost like the director's cut, as it were. So it's I found it really incredible and enjoyable, and not a lot of authors do that. So I think you're setting yourself quite apart on that basis.
Thank you, man. Thank you, Dan. I really appreciate you saying that. I want to take a question here from Richard.
Yeah.
This is really a great one. And hey, Richard, thank you for joining. Appreciate you, buddy. So the question is, does that push you beyond your comfort zone? For sure. Because there's a certain level of comfort that comes from knowing the end. You're writing toward a goal, and that lets you make certain decisions that feel safe. But I feel like I'm at a point in my career where I don't want safe. I find safety in knowing that I can get my characters through things. I feel safe in knowing that my readers and listeners will hopefully go along for the ride with me, even if I blow it from time to time. There's a level of trust there. But on this other hand, extending outside of your comfort zone, for sure. And like I was just saying a moment ago, I need that. Like, there's a sense of I need to take risks. I'm a big F1 fan, and I'm not just like, I don't just watch the races. I listen to the podcasts, and I'm listening to old racers and old commentators. And one thing I've really appreciated, Damon Hill said this recently. He's a British Formula One world champion. And he made this comment. He's like, the moment that you think you're safe and that your seat, your drive in F1 is safe, is the moment that you've lost it, because you're never safe. And the people who are great, the world champions who win race after race, year after year, they're the ones who never get comfortable and who never think they've arrived. Phil Keggy, he's considered one of the greatest guitar players still alive. Jimi Hendrix was asked how he felt about being the greatest guitar player, and Hendrix said, "I don't know, ask Phil Keggy." And my dad recorded Phil in the 70s and 80s. He's Uncle Phil to our family. He's still missing his ring finger on his right hand. I say still, like it grew back. He is phenomenal. And if you to watch that man play is a masterclass in the beauty of acoustic and electric guitar. He's phenomenal. And if you ask him, like, man, what does it feel like to be so great? He'll say, I have so much to learn still. And you're like, you're Phil freaking Keggy, you have nothing more to learn. He's like, no, I have to practice every day, and I feel like I'm behind, and I just need to catch up. And so I think it's that sense of urgency, like, I need to keep going. There's more to do, and that's what Imperium Descent is for me, for sure. Is let's just take the bull by the horn, see where it goes, and have fun doing it.
So we're gonna throw in a question here. Actually, Nikki's joined us. Hey, Nikki. And so a little bit outside, just stepping outside of the Imperium Descent. We'll get back into it in a second. But she's asked, in terms of as an author and father, any advice you have for parents out there in regards to young readers? So I'm assuming to encourage young adults or teens to read. And any advice there, Christopher?
Man, that's a beautiful question, and I'm really trying to think. I'm marrying two thoughts. One is my own personal experience, and then what we've done with our kids. My own personal experience is I was marked as a slow reader in second grade, and that report card came home, and I decided from that moment I wasn't going to read anymore because I didn't like being embarrassed. And I was so cognitively aware, hyper aware of what was happening in my classroom. I could actually test very highly based on the conversations that my teacher was conducting with my fellow students. And so I BS'd my way through almost every book report from second grade till I was a senior in high school, with the exception of maybe 3 books that I read painfully slowly. If you told me that I would be a professional writer one day and have my master's degree in a very heavy reading and writing field, I would have laughed at you. So there's a part of me that says, be careful of the words and labels that we put on our children, and try not to hold them to a normalized standard. There is no normal. Let them help dictate some of that pace, and maybe talk through some of those fears and anxieties with them. I wished somebody had said this to me. Christopher, yeah, you might be a slow reader, but there's nothing wrong with that. What are you enjoying about the story that you are reading? That would have been a powerful question for me. And I think it was further exacerbated by having to read really crappy books in school. I mean, I was just like, what? This has nothing to do with my life. Why are you making me read this? And so I'd read like the first paragraph, and again, I'd close the book, read the back, get the cliff notes, and test really high. Today, with our kids, we've tried to make reading fun. I mean, I think it helps that Dad's kind of a semi-cool guy with some, with some books with his name on it, which is their last name too. I think they kind of like that. So we've tried to do some things. Like one of my sons, he really likes my work, but he also likes to video game a lot. And it got to the point where like, okay, let's do something. So I did a challenge with him, which is if you're going to play games for an hour, and it's usually 2, then you have to do an hour of reading in that day too. And still given lots of liberty. Like you can do it whenever you want. You can do it in the morning. You can do it at night. Split it up 30-30. Doesn't matter. You get to control that part. But our deal is going to be if you play more than an hour of video games a day, that you also have to read an hour a day. And he's going through this book. And he's read most of my other stuff too. And that's been just a lot of fun to have that little kind of contract, age dependent, of course, topically, age appropriate, but trying to make it fun, make it gamify it, if you will, So, and then of course, reading to our kids. Thinking about this now, I used to do a lot of reading to our kids at night, and I would do all the funny voices. And I've heard a lot of voice actors say that over the years, like, yeah, it started when I was doing voices for my kids. And for the most part, I think, most of us really can't do that. We just think, our kids smile and giggle, and that's the joy of it. But to actually take it into a professional place, that's a different conversation. But for the sake of making it valuable for your children, man, I think having mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, whoever you might be, reading to those kids, that's powerful. And that's where it starts.
Well, I'll add a couple comments too. As a parent, I remember when you talked about reading to your kids. We read the Jeff Smith's Bone series to the kids. That was their bedtime series. I actually picked up all the graphic novels or trade paperbacks and read that. And so it was. I didn't do any of the voices, but that was a way just to and at a very young age. But they would see that I'm reading from a book. And the other tip that I've given and I've heard as well is comic books. So maybe a little bit younger, Nikki, but I don't comic books. I still read comic books. They're very accessible. I think the visual part keeps them engaged. And these days, the quality of writing in comic books has elevated from the 60s and 70s and 80s when I was reading those comic books. They're actually literary works now. So I think that can introduce and reduce the stigma of reading, and then from there we'll call it the gateway book, but it gets them into the habit of reading, and words are not scary.
And man, I got to jump on that too, Dan, because I don't know why I didn't think about this, but the reading I did do was comic book reading. Like, I'm having a serious aha moment, like live on camera right now. Like, I have totes full of my comics. I mean, I would take my bike and ride to the local gas station 6 miles away just to buy the latest edition of, the Incredible or Amazing Superman. Wow, I'm having a moment here. That, and I was just listening to a podcast on this, that the graphic novel industry as a whole is growing at a disproportionate rate to how the traditional reading industry is contracting, which is fascinating to me. It's almost like right now audio and graphic novels are both climbing and traditional reading is declining, which is really, I don't know. I feel like we need to pay attention to those things as creators, as parents, as people. It's saying something about our culture, not positive or negative. I don't mean that. I mean, it is saying something about who we are and how we like to learn. And that's powerful to have that kind of knowledge. So, man, thank you for that. Thank you for bringing that up.
The other thing actually was, with parents, you kind of lead by example. So I find it hard. I had a conversation with my kids because, quite frankly, I do enough reading in my day job that I don't like reading.
Yeah.
That's why I listen to audiobooks. But I remember having a conversation encouraging one of my daughters to read, and her retort was effectively, well, you don't read at home. And so it was like, what? And it's true. I think I don't do a lot of reading at home because I do audiobooks. They don't see me read at work, although I read copious amounts of documents. So I started being very intentional about Saturday reading the newspaper and saying, hey, you should read this. This is kind of cool. I think we, as parents and adults, in kids' lives, I think you have a huge impact on what they read, how they read, when they read. And that can, I think, translate into the audiobook format, because I think it's not that entirely foreign.
Yeah, for sure. Great thoughts.
So you mentioned a little bit, and again, I talked about this too. Imperium Descent is your first foray into the voice acting. What made you want to try it?
I think it was hearing and being inspired by great voice actors, honestly. That statement is certainly prefaced by, I've spent a lot of time on stage. I've spent a lot of time performing. I've spent a lot of time in studios growing up. I feel very fortunate to have been raised by a musical family. My dad has owned 6 studios in his lifetime. And so I grew up taking naps under his recording consoles. And so it's in my blood. Like
osmosis.
Osmosis. There it is. And so there's that element to it. So it's not like it's an entirely new bag of tricks. But I still remember it was 2018. I was kind of going through a midlife crisis. Like, what do I want to do next? I've done something with the first 23 years of my professional life. What are the next 23 years going to look like? And I heard, come on in. Thank you so much, baby. Appreciate it. So what are the next 23 years going to look like? And I had really been falling in love with audiobooks. Like, just devouring them. Like somebody had just mentioned on Craig Allenson on his site, like Ruins of the Earth is like a knockoff. I'm like, of course it is. He inspired me. Galaxy, Ruins of the Galaxy are a knockoff of Galaxy's Edge. Of course it is. Like, I'm not hiding that. I'm these are odes to these incredible writers. These are odes to R.C. Bray. The White Lion Chronicles. It's an ode to the Chronicles of Narnia and Tolkien. Like, nothing is new under the sun, and their works aren't original either. So that's the funny part to me. But it's not something I'm trying to hide behind. So when I think of, in the same vein, I remember hearing Bob Bray. Like, this guy's voice, like, I need to smoke 80 packs of cigarettes a day to get the richness of this man's, like, bravado. And I even sent him, this is a funny true story. When I was writing Ruins of the Galaxy 1, before it went to publication with Variant Publications and Jeff Chaney, I had recorded 60-second samples of the book and just sent it to people, like, to get their feedback. And I sent it to R.C. Bray. Like, he's the legend, right? If I can get R.C. Bray to comment on this and give me some feedback. And he did. The guy wrote me back and he's like, man, it sounds good. Try this, think about this when you're approaching the microphone. And like, I couldn't believe it. Forget the fact that a year after that, he would be actually narrating my books. That just floored. I mean, I was on the ground. I was done. But to answer the question, it was hearing people like R.C. Bray read these stories and take me away to a different world. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to take people away to a different world. I wanted them to escape for a moment and have the sense that, you know what, life is going to be okay. And there is a reprieve for my pain. There's a reprieve for my darkness. There is a reprieve for the discomfort and the uncertainty and the anxiety in my life. And for just a few minutes in a day, I'm whisked away because someone is telling me a story and I feel like I'm 6 years old again, being read to before I go to sleep at night. And I'm safe.
Wow. Well, and for those who haven't listened to it yet, you got to listen to Imperium Descent. I think, Christopher, you're I've said this to you before. I would put you in the same category as Bob.
Wow.
Bob may not appreciate me saying that, but I don't care.
Oh, man. Well, we can end the night now. I'm good. Thank you, Dan. Gosh, that's very kind of you. Thank you.
Well, it's well deserved. So, you've described it, and you've described it to me as voice acting. I know that Audible calls it narrators. So we often hear those terms narrated by, or people refer to as narrators. In your view, is there a difference? And if so, what's the difference between a voice actor and a narrator?
Great question. And I think it's one that gets asked often. So I like being able to tackle it. Narration is, if I were to say, this is narration. Aurelia looked across the room and she said, "Where did those plates come from?" And the person holding the plates replied, "I brought them to you. Do you like them?" Aurelia replied, "Yes, I quite enjoy them. Thank you so much." "You're welcome," said the servant. That's narration. There's some inflection, but really they're not making an attempt to embody the soul of the story. They're not trying to create characterization in the character's dialogue. So whereas Aurelia looked up and saw the servant come in with the plates. "Where did you get those plates?" I brought them from the cellar, Aurelia. Would you? No, it's fine. Bring them over here." Like, now I'm acting. And so that's the difference. One is just more temperate and solid. It's consistent. It's professional. And there are some great narrators. But they're not going to do the accents and they're not going to cry when the characters are crying. That's where the acting part of voice acting comes in. It's much more difficult. It's far more demanding. You really have to get out of your own way. You have to be okay with being embarrassed and really putting yourself out there. Richard, that's great. Reading versus performing. That's exactly right. That's probably the easiest summation of it.
Yeah, we got another comment here: black and white and color. I like that. That's a good way to distinguish the two.
Yeah, for sure.
So, given that and I agree with you. I think there's a significant difference between a narrator and a voice actor. Is that one of those things where if you get introduced as a narrator or described as a narrator, you'll just kind of grit your teeth and smile? Or is that like, no, I'm a voice actor?
I don't think I'm that pretentious yet. Who knows? Who knows what might come?
Yet.
Yeah, I don't think it would bother me. I still consider myself more of an author than even a vocal performer, though that could change as the story unfolds. It actually, as of day one, it's selling better on Audible than it is in Kindle by far, and that actually speaks to me quite a bit and encourages me. Audible already, audio already accounts for over 90% of my income personally, and I think that's probably true across the board for people who do have audio titles out. And so it's interesting that we focus so much on Kindle and the print books when that's actually the smallest segment from a business standpoint of the market. And Audible is growing like year on end. It keeps growing, audio in general. So we've adopted this whole audio first mentality. How does it sound? Even before you're writing it, I'm speaking every single sentence I write at this keyboard. As it's coming out of my mouth, I'm saying it because I know I'm going to have to record it later. But I was doing that before I thought about voice acting, which is it needs to sound natural. If it sounds natural to me, chances are it's going to sound natural to my audience. And yeah, so I think that's that approach is really, really important. So I kind of lost the question. Help me, Dan.
No. that this is just stream of consciousness and conversation. But I think even Craig Allenson actually said in one of his Facebook events, he writes for audiobook now.
Yeah. So, and I think you have to. Honestly, it's so popular. It's such a profound way to tell stories. Yeah. Oh, and I think your whole point, like, would you get upset if somebody introduced you as a narrator over a voice actor? Not yet. We'll go with that. Not yet.
Not yet.
But maybe the day is coming where, like, excuse me, I am not a narrator.
And so, as an actor, what
actor
do you prepare? So for Imperium Descent Volume 1, when you were doing the voice acting, I should actually just say narrating, just to bug the heck out of you. So when you narrate,
we need a little heckling. We need a little heckling.
Did you prepare much for the actual recording of the book?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. There was on several levels actually. So one is just the technical side of this is a great comment. 10 completely different voices in the first chapter. Come on. That's what we're buying. I thank you, Nikki. Wow. Yep. Appreciate it. So there's the technical side, which not a lot of people think about, but my office, let's see if I can pan up here. The whole office, it looks kind of cool. Everything is treated, like the walls all had to be treated because there's too much echo and 400 kilohertz range, and the bright end at 16K was too intense, and like all these things. So we actually had to measure and treat the room sonically to get it to be what we call being more tame. And then you have outboard gear that you have to invest in. So this U87 Neumann microphone, it's a beautiful microphone. This one was owned by Whitney Houston, and my dad bought it off of her before she passed away. That goes into a warm audio preamp. That goes into a solid state Logic 2 Plus audio interface. That goes into Pro Tools. And then you have to know how to operate the software. And I have an editor who goes through everything. And so there's a lot of technical buildup, and that didn't happen overnight. That was several months of treating the room and getting the tech right. Then from a physical standpoint, I knew it was going to demand something of me energy-wise. I knew I had to work on the muscles in my diaphragm, as well as my jaw, my lips, and my articulation. So I started working with 2 vocal coaches and getting feedback from professional voice actors, and I would send them samples, and they'd come back and give me critique on things to work on. Did some mic and audio shootouts with a producer here in New York, And all of that was very informative. And then the exercises began. And so I started knowing that this was going to be a likelihood probably by March of this year. I was working on daily vocal exercises to get and I'm still, it's funny, I feel like an athlete now, but only in this part of my body. Like, and you're working on paraka paraka bodogo podogo budugu pudugu pidigi pidigi pedike pedike and yeah 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 yo 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 you. And you're doing this and you're walking around the house and your kids are like, what is wrong with you? And so it takes half an hour just to get my voice warmed up enough to be able to track for 1 to 2 hours. And then after a week of that, maybe I can do 3, but then I need to take 2 days off to rest. And even trying to do coffee with Christopher on Fridays during those times, my voice would be in pain that afternoon, and I'd know I'd have to slow down and not talk for 24 hours. So it's a commitment. Like, it's not just, oh, you sit down behind a microphone and talk. It is a commitment. Like, it's a whole thing. But I love it because I feel like it's a new part of my job description. Yeah, I get to write the books, but I'm also a voice actor. And I really like how they cross. It's a lot of fun.
Wow. I think to know how much work, like I had a feeling it wasn't just, I'm just going to show up in the booth and knock it out, but to know the amount of preparation, even on a regular basis, I think that's quite impressive, and it's quite incredible. I think it just makes listening to the audiobook version that much more enjoyable because of knowing how much effort you put into it.
Thank you. Well, value added then. And I think honestly for everybody to know that, like, there are several voice actors who put stuff out. I'm by far, I'm not saying I'm the only one or the first one whatsoever. But maybe for a lot of my particular listeners, I might be the first one to talk about it. But I think it's important that everybody knows when they listen to whoever they're listening to, Jeffrey Kafer, Marcy Bray, like whoever it is that you're listening to, these are consummate professionals beyond me, in my opinion. They're doing it day in and day out. I just have to do one book at a time, which is all I want to do. People ask me, like, are you going to branch out now? I'm like, no, I can barely handle my own stuff. I'm good for right now. If my books bomb, maybe I'll call up Podium or Audible Studios and be like, you got a job for me? But it, just for them to recognize, wow, there's so much tradecraft that goes on. Mark Thompson is probably my favorite. He's read a lot of the Star Wars. Like, his byline should be, does Harrison Ford better than Harrison Ford? He's incredible. And when you watch him, and this is the mark, right? When you get to do a section and they have almost no interruptions. They don't stop at all, and they can read an entire section of text with all these voices, and they just move in and out of the characters. I'm like, that is next. That's the goal right there. And so, Mark Thompson in my mind is probably the very best. Him and Mark Burnett, who read my Resonant Sun and Resonant Abyss books with Jeff. I can't believe we got Mark Boyett. So did I say Barnett? It's Boyett.
So I know we're coming on the hour. I've got a few questions, and I know there's a few questions still in the comment section, but you mentioned this earlier. You hinted at it. You also talked about it in a recent coffee with Christopher. Rumors that you're considering organizing a weekend get-together somewhere in the Thousand Islands. Confirm, deny, plead the fifth.
Yeah. You have to be in the inner circle. So no. Yeah, I'd love to talk about it. So we're really looking at how do we expand the community? How do I scale this up and make it even more sustainable for myself and for my family? How do we extend the reach that we have of the art? And so one of the things we're talking about, excuse me, as I burp live, I'm so sorry. You can get that on the Rogues and Rebels blooper reel. I had 2 burps in there I had to include. One of the things we're launching, it looks like this January, I think, is a subscription model. So everybody can still get my books as they normally do on Amazon and Audible and have a wonderful time with them. That will always be there. But for those who are like, no, I'm a super fan. Like, I want to be involved. I want the whole Hopperfest 23. I want the whole enchilada. We're going to offer some ways that people can have more access to the art, early access, sometimes weekly access to the art, including swag, signed hard copies. And I mean, there's even a tier we're talking about in which I will do a painting for you and send it across the world, which not a lot of people know that. I'm about to post a picture this week. I'm painting a big piece for my wife for her birthday on the 21st. So yeah. But all that to say that one of the things that's come out of this is not just building a community and a subscription model, but saying, hey, let's get together and let's do a face-to-face, because while this is super fun, Dan, you and I have yet to meet in person, and I really want to meet you in person. And there are so many, I could say this about every VIPer, but especially those who've been joining me for Coffee with Christopher, many of the people who've been stopping by tonight and leaving incredible comments. I want to meet everybody. And I feel like they want to meet each other too, because there's been groups forming outside of me that I'm hearing about. I'm like, that's so fun. Like, that's a health, that means something healthy is happening, that it's beyond me. It's not my oversight. I just get to watch it and be a part of it. And so all that to say that we are seriously considering doing, I shouldn't say seriously considering. At this point, I'm pretty confident we're going to do an event next summer.
You heard it live here, folks.
So yeah, so probably late July, maybe the month of August, early August, doing a 3-day event, trying to keep it very, very low cost. I don't even foresee charging an event fee. Where I would rather have people spend their money is A, getting here, and then B, taking care of whatever their own accommodations are. If we can get them a deal, I'll work on that. If we can, but they'll be paying for their own food and they get to dictate what that is. So low cost or no cost at all, spend it on themselves, but just come out, whether it's 1 day or 3 days. We have some beautiful venues here in the Thousand Islands. I was just talking to my mom. She's the assistant GM for one of the big hotels here, and she's setting me up with some contacts to talk about, boat tours in the Thousand Islands, getting to tour one of the castles like Bolt Castle or Shadow Island. There's just so many fun things that can be done here in the summer, and I want to share that with everybody. And so, a concert with my wife and her music on one of the evenings on a veranda overlooking the St. Lawrence River. I mean, there are some things I think that would be so memorable that we could all just enjoy one another's company. I've already talked to Rebecca Woods and Daniel Wisniewski, and they are both very interested in attending, meeting people, signing some autographs. I'm going to try to reach out to Bob, though I'm being very careful with his voice and recovery, and I don't want to infringe there at all. But, having him there would be a lot of fun. If other authors want to come out, Jeff Chaney, Ken Lazito, we'll see. We're going to put some invitations out, see if people are interested. Might even a friend of mine has an incredible property on one of the islands that I'm talking to him about now to see if he would be interested in opening that up for one of the evenings or afternoons. So I don't know, just a lot of possibilities. I'd love to hear from VIPers, especially, who are like, yeah, I want to be a part of that. So yeah, it could be fun.
Well,
Your word.
I know some of us on this and in the VIP. I know Rob. I met Rob at Brave Fest,
Cool.
which was not that far away in South Hero, Vermont. And yeah, like you said, the relationships, the friendships, the connections that you make in person just make all of the other interactions until the next time we meet in person that much more special. So I think we can definitely do something that can bring your community together and actually I think would be awesome. So I'm going to clear my calendar for July and August.
It'd be awesome. Yeah. Well, cool. The enthusiasm really warms my heart, honestly. Like, it makes me, the more people say they want to come out, I'm like, really? You want? Well, yeah, let's do it. So at this point, I feel like the big one was my wife was like, I think that would be fun. And if the boss is in, then we're in.
CEO, CFOs, give you the thumbs up on that.
That's right.
So, Christopher, I see that we're at 9 o'clock in the hour. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time and your time as well. And, protecting your voice, it's a valuable treasure these days. So
I'm not recording until this weekend. So actually, I'll probably push it off till Monday. I have a little bit more on Imperium Descent Volume 2 to do. But yeah.
So why don't you end tonight's event off with maybe any words of encouragement, or what you'd like to say about, would you like to leave with us about Imperium Descent, or what we can do to help get the word out, anything like that that we can do for you?
Thank you. I think, just sharing it. If you enjoy the book, obviously tell somebody, tell one person. I think that's the best way, tell the whole world. No, don't tell the whole world, but tell somebody that the book meant something to you, a character you connected with, or a theme that provoked you. That's the stuff that I think is worth sharing. And that's the beauty of art. I try to do that with everything I listen to, everything I read. I try to recommend it to at least one friend. And so that's my personal habit. I gift that to those who are watching tonight. In terms of what I want to say about the book, I think honestly, it's very personal. And that is that I feel so grateful. I get to do this. And that's a privilege. And so I take it seriously, and yet playfully, because playfulness is always better than seriousness. I try to think like a businessman, but I want to make like a creator. And so I just want people to know that I feel so grateful for this conversation. The gratitude I have toward readers who are writing in, leaving reviews, shooting me direct messages, like just saying how they were impacted by the book. Like that humbles me. It I feel honored would be a better word. It's like this sense of honor that I feel when somebody says, I love what you've made. And then my only response to that is, I love that you enjoyed it. Like that makes it so beautiful. And so for readers and listeners to know, just I have this incredible sense of gratitude tonight, sitting here in my office, in our home, in our property in Northern New York. And the privilege it is to get to talk to you, Dan, to see people's comments come in. And I don't take it for granted. If this was the last book I wrote, it was the best one so far.
Wow. And so the best is yet to come with future volumes of Imperium Descent. I know I'm looking forward to them. And I know Volume 1 just launched, but when do you anticipate Volume 2 being released, just to get people's appetites whetted?
Oh, great question. December 15th is the publication date that we have set. So a month from now, you're going to get the second installment. Audio might be a little late because Audible is running behind on their approval process, which kind of stinks, but it is what it is. And then book 3 is slated for January 15th, actually. So we're trying to do every 30 days on the first 3 books. Might slow it down just a little bit. But yeah, we're trying to, get the first 3 installments out and in people's ears and eyes, and hope they have fun with it.
Now, we hope everyone's saving an Audible credit and clearing your calendars to spend some time listening to those volumes. So.
Awesome. Thank you everybody for the comments that have been coming through all night. We haven't gotten to all of them and posted all of them, but really appreciate you putting them up there. Oh, and I do have to give a shout out. My aunt just signed on. My Aunt Janie. Congratulations, EK. Love you, Aunt Janie. Love you, Aunt Janie. Thank you for that. That's precious.
Excellent. Well, again, for everyone who joined and participated, thank you for being here tonight with us, for the comments. We look forward to continuing the conversation on Facebook Messenger at Next Coffee with Christopher. So this is just the beginning, I think. So, Christopher, thank you again for making yourself available. Thank you to Jennifer for freeing your time up or allowing us to get time with you. So I had a blast chatting with you and being part of this. So thank you for the opportunity as well.
You're welcome. And Dan, thank you for hosting. Thank you for being such a great host, interviewer, interfacer with the wonderful public out there. You're just a gentleman, a scholar, and I consider you a friend. So thank you.
Well, feeling is mutual. So thank you for the opportunity. And everyone have a good night. Thanks for joining, and we'll look forward to the next opportunity.
All right. Bye, everybody.